The Easter lilies were arranged perfectly on the dining room table, white and pristine, just like everything in my mother's house. Crystal stemware caught the spring sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The brunch spread could have graced the cover of Southern Living magazine. Eleanor Whitfield didn't do holidays halfway. She did them with military precision and a credit card that never seemed to have a limit. I sat at my usual spot, the corner seat closest to the kitchen, farthest from the conversation. My sister Charlotte held court at the head of the table opposite Mom, showing off her new Cartier watch and talking about her latest real estate closing. Her husband Brad nodded along, performing the role of supportive spouse with practiced ease. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle George were there too, along with my cousin Melissa, a trifecta of relatives who'd spent my entire life comparing me unfavorably to Charlotte. "Sophie, honey, is that the same dress you wore to Christmas?" Mom asked, her smile sharp as a paper cut. "I told you I could help you find something nicer." It wasn't the same dress. But correcting her would only extend the humiliation. "Leave her alone, Eleanor," Dad said quietly from his end of the table. He was the only one who ever defended me, though his defenses were always soft and easily overruled. Mom waved him off like a persistent fly and turned back to Charlotte. "Tell everyone about the Hamptons house, darling. The one you're listing for $12 million. I reached for my mimosa and prepared for another holiday of invisibility. Growing up Whitfield meant understanding the family hierarchy before you could spell your own name. Charlotte was the golden child. Born first, born beautiful, born with the innate understanding that the world would bend to her will. I came 4 years later, an afterthought with mousy brown hair and a tendency to read books in the corner instead of charming guests. Mom had already invested everything in Charlotte. I was just there. The differences were catalogued from birth. Charlotte's baby book was a leather-bound album with professional photographs and detailed milestones. Mine was a drugstore notebook half-filled. Charlotte's first words, first steps, first everything were celebrated with parties and phone trees. Mine were noted with absent nods and, "That's nice, honey." Charlotte got the debutante ball, the sorority connections, the internship at the prestigious real estate firm. I got hand-me-down expectations and the constant reminder that I'd never measure up. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the question that defined my childhood. The worst part was that Charlotte wasn't even cruel on purpose. She was simply oblivious, so secure in her position that she never noticed the damage her shadow caused. She'd say things like, "Sophie, you're so brave to wear that," or, "I admire how you don't care what people think," without any awareness of the devastation in her words. Mom was different. Mom was deliberate. Eleanor Whitfield had built her identity around being the mother of a success story. When Charlotte graduated summa cum laude, Mom threw a party. When I graduated with honors, not summa, just regular honors, Mom forgot to order the cake. "It slipped my mind," she said when I asked. There was so much going on with Charlotte's grad school applications. Charlotte wasn't even applying to grad school that year. She was too busy being perfect without additional credentials. When Charlotte's real estate career took off, Mom framed her first big commission check and hung it in the living room. When I started my own business, a small financial consulting firm, Mom asked if I was sure I wouldn't rather get a real job. The business was my rebellion and my salvation. Whitfield Financial Consulting started in my studio apartment with a laptop and a desperate need to prove that I could build something without the family name attached. I'd always been good with numbers. Where Charlotte saw properties and potential, I saw patterns and possibilities. I could look at a business's books and tell you within 10 minutes where they were bleeding money. I could build financial models that predicted market shifts 6 months before they happened. Within 5 years, Whitfield Financial had grown from a one-woman operation to a boutique firm with 12 employees and a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. My annual revenue had crossed $4 million. My personal net worth was approaching $8 million. And my family had no idea. I'd kept everything deliberately modest. Same car I'd driven for 7 years. Same apartment, though I'd bought the building 2 years ago. Same thrift store fashion sense that Mom loved to critique. Why hide it? Because I'd watched what happened when family discovered money. I'd seen relatives circle like sharks around my successful cousin on my father's side. I'd watched my mother leverage Charlotte's success for social capital at every opportunity. I wanted to be loved for who I was. And every holiday, every brunch, every family gathering confirmed that without the trappings of success, I was invisible. 3 years ago, Mom announced she was opening a boutique. Eleanor's Elegance, high-end women's clothing for the discerning customer. She needed investors. Charlotte put in $200,000. Aunt Patricia added $150,000. Uncle George contributed $100,000. Everyone made a big show of supporting Eleanor's entrepreneurial spirit. Nobody asked me. Of course they didn't. The family charity case didn't have that kind of money. That night I called my accountant. I need you to set up an anonymous investment, I said. Eleanor's Elegance. They're looking for capital. I want to put in $890,000. Enough to be the majority silent partner. Marcus Chin, my accountant and one of my few confidants, was quiet for a moment. That's almost double what everyone else combined is putting in. Why anonymous? Because I want to see what happens when she doesn't know it's me. I want to see if the business succeeds or fails on its own merits. And honestly, I want leverage. Just in case. Marcus didn't judge. That's why I'd worked with him for 8 years. I'll set it up through a holding company, he said. She'll never know. For 3 years, I'd watched my mother's boutique thrive on my money while she called me a charity case. I'd received quarterly reports on my investment, attended family gatherings where Mom bragged about her business success and said nothing. I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. Building Whitfield Financial had been the loneliest and most exhilarating experience of my life. I'd started with nothing but a business degree and a chip on my shoulder the size of Charlotte's engagement ring. My first client was a struggling bakery owner who couldn't figure out why she was losing money every month. I found $40,000 in wasteful spending within her first quarterly review. She referred me to 3 other business owners before the month was out. Word spread. Small businesses became medium businesses. Medium businesses introduced me to their contacts at larger firms. Within 3 years I was consulting for a regional bank chain on their lending risk assessments. The work consumed me in the best possible way. I'd found something I was genuinely brilliant at. Not Charlotte-level charming, not Mom-level poised, but actually measurably brilliant. I could see financial futures like some people see color. Patterns emerged from spreadsheets the way melodies emerge from sheet music. My team grew carefully. I hired people who'd been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. I had a type. Marcus Chin had been passed over for partner at his old firm because he didn't play golf. Now he managed our accounting division and owned 8% of the company. Danielle Foster had been told she was too aggressive at every corporate job she'd held. Now she ran our client relations and had personally secured 3 of our biggest accounts through sheer force of competence. We were a company of misfits who'd built something extraordinary while nobody was watching. You could be living in a penthouse, Danielle said once, reviewing our year-end numbers. You could be driving a Porsche. Instead you dress like a grad student and let your family treat you like dirt. The grad student thing is comfortable, I said. And the family thing, it's complicated. It's not complicated. It's masochistic. She wasn't wrong. But there was something I couldn't explain to her. The strange addiction of watching people underestimate you. The power of holding cards nobody knew existed. Every dismissive comment became fuel. Every comparison to Charlotte became motivation. Every charity case label became a secret joke only I understood. The Eleanor's Elegance investment was my most personal card. Every time Mom bragged about her business acumen, every time she credited her own vision for the boutique success, I knew the truth. Without my $890,000, she'd never have secured the prime retail location. Without my capital, she couldn't have weathered the supply chain issues during the pandemic. I'd saved her business twice without her knowledge. And twice she'd come home from a successful quarter and made comments about how Sophie could learn something from real entrepreneurs. The quarterly reports were always bittersweet. Profit margins strong, thanks to my initial capital investment. Customer retention excellent, thanks to the marketing consultant I'd quietly recommended through an anonymous note to her business manager. Expansion into online sales successful, thanks to the e-commerce platform my company had built the financial model for, without ever mentioning the family connection. I was my mother's silent guardian angel. And she called me a charity case. Every Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and birthday I sat at that corner seat and absorbed the insults. I cataloged them like data points, each one adding to a running tally I kept in the back of my mind. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. A breaking point. A moment of clarity. Permission to finally reveal the truth. Easter brunch would turn out to be all three. The conversation shifted, as it always did, to comparative success. Charlotte closed on 4 properties last month, Mom announced, refilling her champagne flute. In this market. My brilliant girl. Charlotte smiled modestly. It's all about relationships, Mom. Building trust with clients. Speaking of building things, Aunt Patricia said, turning to me with that pitying smile I knew too well. How's your little consulting thing going, Sophie? Still doing taxes for small businesses? It's financial consulting, I said quietly. Not taxes. Same thing, isn't it? Uncle George laughed. Numbers are numbers. Mom set down her glass with a performative sigh. Oh, Sophie. You're the family charity case. Always needing handouts while your sister thrives. She laughed, looking around the table for validation. Aunt Patricia giggled. Charlotte at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom, that's not. What? It's true. Mom waved her hand dismissively. Last month you asked to borrow money for your car repair. The month before that, you couldn't afford the family vacation to Aspen. Sophie, honey, we love you, but let's be honest about where things stand. I hadn't asked for money. I'd made a comment about car repairs and Mom had insisted really, on paying, then held it over my head for weeks. The Aspen trip I'd declined because I had a client presentation that weekend, not because of money. But corrections didn't matter. The narrative was set. Something shifted inside me. A wall that had been holding for 30 years developed a crack. I checked my watch. Not because I needed to know the time, but because I needed a moment to think. Then I pulled out my phone. Sophie, really? Mom said. Phones at the table? That's exactly the kind of thing that holds you back professionally. I typed a text to Marcus. Withdraw silent partnership from Eleanor's Elegance. All of it. Effective immediately. I pressed send. 30 seconds later, Mom's business phone started buzzing in her purse. Mom frowned at the interruption, pulling out her phone with obvious irritation. It's the boutique's accountant, she muttered. On Easter Sunday. This better be important. She stepped away from the table, phone pressed to her ear. I watched her pace by the window, her posture shifting from annoyed to confused to alarmed. What do you mean, withdrawing? Her voice carried across the room. The silent partner? Now. Charlotte looked up from her phone. What's happening? Mom returned to the table, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. There's a problem at the boutique. Our primary investor, the silent partner, is pulling out their entire stake. Almost $900,000. That's insane, Uncle George said. Who would do that without warning? I don't know. I've never even met them. Mom was scrolling through her phone, panic edging into her voice. Everything went through lawyers and holding companies. They were just there. Reliable. Never asked questions. Can they do that? Charlotte asked. Just pull out. Apparently there's a clause in the partnership agreement. Withdrawal with 30 days notice for any reason. Mom's hands were shaking. But why now? We just had our best quarter ever. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Done. They're going to start making calls. You sure about this? I typed back, I'm sure. Dad was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He'd always been more observant than the others. Maybe he sensed something was off. Eleanor, he said quietly, how much of the business does this silent partner own? 63%. Mom's voice cracked. They're the majority stakeholder. Aunt Patricia gasped. You let someone own 63% of your business without knowing who they are? The money was good. The terms were favorable. They never interfered. Mom was fully panicking now. Charlotte, call your lawyer. Uncle George, you know people in finance. I know people in finance, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Mom actually laughed. Sophie, honey, this isn't a small business tax problem. This is serious money. I know exactly how serious it is. I set down my mimosa. The withdrawing investor is Cypress Holdings LLC. It's a shell company registered in Delaware, managed through a law firm in Manhattan. Mom stared at me. How do you know that? Because I created Cypress Holdings LLC. 3 years ago. To invest in your boutique. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds outside seemed to stop singing. Charlotte's mouth fell open. Uncle George froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Aunt Patricia made a small choking sound. Mom shook her head slowly. That's not possible. You don't have that kind of money. You're the family charity case? I finished. Yes. You've mentioned that. Multiple times. For multiple years. While I've been secretly funding your entire business. Sophie. Dad's voice was thick. Is this true? I pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio app. Whitfield Financial Consulting. That's my company. Not a little consulting thing. A boutique firm with 12 employees, $4.2 million in annual revenue, and a client list that includes regional banks and Fortune 500 companies. I slid the phone across the table to my mother. Current valuation, $12 million. My personal net worth is just over $8 million. Mom picked up the phone with trembling hands. She scrolled through the screens, the company website, the financial statements, the press mentions. Her face cycled through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been fear. This can't be right. She looked up at me with wild eyes. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car. You wear clothes from Target. I own that apartment building, I said calmly. All 6 units. The car is a choice, I like it. And there's nothing wrong with Target. But why? Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you hide this? I turned to my sister, the one I'd spent my whole life being compared to, always unfavorably. Because I wanted to know if anyone would value me without the money. Without the success. Without the achievements to wave around. I gestured at the elegant dining room. I spent 30 years watching this family measure worth in dollars and square footage. I wanted to see what I was worth to you when I had neither. And? Dad asked quietly. And I was worth nothing. The words came out flat, factual. Every family gathering I was ignored or insulted. Every achievement I mentioned was dismissed. Every time I tried to participate I was pushed to the corner. Literally. I pointed at my seat. The kids' spot. I'm 34 years old and you still seat me at the kids' end of the table. Mom found her voice. Sophie, that's not, we didn't mean. You called me a charity case 15 minutes ago. My voice was steady. In front of everyone. You laughed about it. Aunt Patricia giggled. Nobody defended me except Dad, and even he just asked you to leave me alone. Like I'm an annoyance to be tolerated, not a person to be valued. The tears in my mother's eyes might have moved me once. Today they just looked like performance. I invested $890,000 in your boutique, I continued. I saved your business during the pandemic when your cash flow collapsed. I recommended consultants who improved your profit margins by 23%. I did all of that anonymously because I knew that if you found out it was me, you'd find a way to minimize it. To credit yourself. To explain why it didn't really count. Sophie, please. Mom's voice cracked. You can't withdraw that money. The business will collapse. No, it won't. I shook my head. You'll have to find new investors. You'll probably have to downsize. You might have to close the second location. But the core business can survive, if you make smart decisions. Then why are you doing this? Charlotte demanded. If you're so successful, why take it out on Mom? I turned to my sister. Because she called me a charity case. For the 100th time. And I realized I was waiting for something that was never going to come. Recognition, respect, a seat at the adult table. I was waiting for her to see me without proof of my worth. I stood up from my corner seat. That's never going to happen. So I'm done waiting. I walked toward the door, then paused. The withdrawal has a 30-day notice period. Use it wisely. Find other investors, restructure your debt, whatever you need to do. I looked at my mother one last time. I won't be at the next family gathering. Or the one after that. When you're ready to treat me like family instead of a failure, you know how to reach me. Mom stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't just leave. We're not done discussing this. Actually, we are, I said. For 30 years, you've controlled every conversation in this family. You've decided who matters and who doesn't. You've distributed love and attention like a currency, and I've always come up short. I turned to face her fully. That ends today. Not because I proved myself, I shouldn't have had to. But because I'm done accepting crumbs from a table I helped set. The tears were streaming down Mom's face now, ruining her perfect makeup. I didn't know, she whispered. How could I have known? You could have asked, I said simply. Once. In 30 years. You could have asked what I was building, what I cared about, who I was becoming. You never did. Sophie. Dad stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood. Wait. I paused. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice rough. I should have said it before. I should have said it every day. I'm proud of who you are, with or without the money. It was the first time anyone in my family had said those words to me without qualifications. Thank you, Dad. I nodded at him. You can come visit. Just you. Anytime. I walked out, leaving the Easter lilies pristine and my family in ruins. The fallout was immediate and messy. By Monday morning, the news had spread through the extended family. My phone lit up with texts and calls. Some accusatory, some curious, a few surprisingly supportive. I responded to none of them. Mom's boutique scrambled to find replacement funding. She called every investor she knew, leveraged every social connection, but the terms she received were nowhere near as favorable as mine had been. The second location, which had been her pride and joy, was put up for sale within 2 weeks. The family group chat, one I'd been added to years ago but rarely participated in, exploded with messages. Some family members defended Mom, calling me ungrateful and vindictive. Others, surprisingly, started sharing their own stories of being overlooked or dismissed. Cousin Rachel, who I barely knew, sent a private message. I always thought you got treated unfairly at holidays. Glad someone finally said something. Charlotte called me once. I let it go to voicemail. Sophie, this is a lot. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel less than. I didn't realize. A long pause. That's not an excuse. I should have realized. I should have seen what was happening. Can we talk? Please. I saved the message but didn't respond. Not yet. Aunt Patricia predictably took Mom's side. She sent a lengthy email about family loyalty and Christian forgiveness that I deleted without reading past the first paragraph. She then proceeded to call Dad repeatedly, demanding he talk sense into that girl. Dad, to his credit, told her to mind her own business. Uncle George surprisingly reached out with something approaching respect. I had no idea you'd built something like that, his text read. I'd love to learn more about your business sometime. No family drama, just genuine curiosity. I told him I'd think about it. The business press picked up the story, not the family drama but the Whitfield financial angle. Hidden gem. How one financial consultant built an $8 million fortune working from a studio apartment. The irony of the coverage wasn't lost on me. The same narrative that had made me invisible in my family, the modest living, the quiet work, became the hook that made my story interesting to the outside world. My actual team celebrated with champagne when they saw the article. Finally, Danielle said, raising her glass. The world knows what we've known for years. Does it feel good? Marcus asked me later when the others had gone home. The reveal. I thought about it. It feels necessary. Whether it feels good. I'm still figuring that out. Mom texted 3 times. The first was angry. How could you do this to your own mother? The second was pleading. The boutique is everything to me. Please reconsider. The third was just 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was being cruel but because I knew that responding now would undo everything. She needed to sit with the consequences. We all did. 6 months later I bought a house. Not a mansion. A craftsman cottage with a garden and a home office with enough room for my growing team's occasional meetings. It was modest by my means but felt enormous after years of deliberate minimalism. Dad helped me move in. Just Dad, as I'd promised. We spent a Saturday carrying boxes and assembling furniture, talking more than we had in years. Your mother cried for a week, he said, handing me a screwdriver. After Easter. I know. She's starting to understand, I think. How much she missed. How much damage she caused. He paused. She saved every quarterly report from your investment. Did you know that? She just found out they were all from you. She's been reading them over and over. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I filed it away for later. The boutique survived, Dad continued. Smaller but surviving. She had to close the second location, but the main store is doing okay. She actually learned to run it more efficiently. Says she wishes she'd done that years ago. Good, I said. And I meant it. I'd never wanted to destroy her business, just to stop being destroyed by her indifference. Charlotte reached out again 3 months after Easter. A real letter this time, handwritten and hesitant. She apologized for years of passive cruelty, for never noticing my struggles, for accepting the family narrative without question. She asked if we could start over, not as the golden child and the disappointment, but as sisters. I agreed to coffee. It was awkward and tearful and not remotely fixed, but it was a beginning. I didn't realize how much I benefited from being the favorite, Charlotte admitted over lattes. I thought I'd earned everything I had. It never occurred to me that the system was rigged in my favor from the start. It's hard to see privilege when you're standing in it, I said. I want to do better. I want to know my sister, the real one, not the version Mom described. It would take time. Years maybe. But for the first time I believed she meant it. Mom sent a letter too eventually. It arrived on my birthday, the right day this time, and was 4 pages of apology, explanation and regret. She admitted to the favoritism, the dismissiveness, the casual cruelty she'd mistaken for humor. She didn't ask for forgiveness, just for the chance to do better. I invited her to my housewarming party the following month. She came with flowers and a nervous smile, and she didn't once mention my decor or my outfit or my choices. It was the first time I could remember being in a room with her without feeling judged. "Your garden is beautiful," she said at one point, looking out at the roses I'd planted. "I didn't know you liked gardening." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. "I'd like to learn," she said quietly. "If you'll let me." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Trust would take years to rebuild. But sitting in my garden that evening, surrounded by my chosen family and the relatives who were learning to see me clearly, I felt something I hadn't experienced at a family gathering before. Belonging. Not because of what I'd earned or built or proved, but because I'd finally demanded it. Danielle found me by the rose bushes, glass of wine in hand. "How do you feel?" she asked. I looked around at the garden, the house, the people learning to love me correctly. "Like I finally cashed out at the right time," I said. She laughed. "That's the most you thing you've ever said." Maybe it was. But for the first time, being the most me felt like exactly enough.